I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
CJ, let's review the week ahead. Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final is on Monday. Thursday is the NHL Awards. Friday is the start of the NHL Draft. Goes into Saturday as well. And then the Monday after is when free agency starts. Are you ready for these next 7-8 days?
No.
Big money siege? No.
I couldn't possibly be ready for this. I mean, you also have Tuesday is the Hockey Hall of Fame induction class comes out. Wednesday, the window to buy out player contracts opens, and it's only a 4-day window this year, which is highly unusual, which would mean we're going to see all the buyouts happen between June 26th and June 30th when it closes again. I'm sure there'll be trades in addition to all the scheduled activities. We got the awards show somewhere in there. It's just, it's too much, but it's also, it is what it is. We don't make the schedule. So onward we go.
Man, I could just tell the way you quickly just said no. Like you're a little bit at your wit's end.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I don't even want to look past Game 7, to be honest. I mean, I think that the game that's going to be played Monday night in Florida, I'm really lucky I'm going to get to be there to cover it. Mm-hmm. And it might be the biggest NHL game of my career. You could argue maybe the biggest game played in decades, just with everything at stake, legacy-wise for Connor McDavid, with the fact that the Oilers have come back to force a Game 7 down 3-0. You know, I think that you're seeing a lot of momentum pick up in terms of, you know, any series that starts 3-0, there's going to be lacking of interest being this late in June, all those things. But now all of a sudden you have all this focus on this one game. I mean, I almost don't want to look past that because I'm not in a rush to get that over with. It's been a long season. We've covered it right from hop, and it all culminates with that one game. And it happens we played on June 24th, the latest ever for a Game 7 in kind of a non-pandemic, in what we'll call a quote unquote normal year. And so this is it's going to be an event. It's going to be really cool. And it's going to be one of those games I think we remember for a long, long time, no matter how it plays out.
First Game 7 in any of the big 4 North American leagues since COVID happened. Like,
wow. In the championship round, I guess you mean.
In a championship round. Yes.
Right. Because it's 2019 was the last cup final that went 7, Boston, St. Louis. Mm-hmm. Didn't the NBA have 7-game series, or I don't know.
Not in the championship round, not since COVID happened.
Oh, right. I was thinking of the Boston, Miami, but that was a conference final.
Correct.
Right. But yeah. Wild. I mean, look, at Game 7, there's like, you almost can throw out all these sort of cliches or whatever, but there's nothing. I mean, I think the emotion and the kind of desperation you see in the playoffs in general in the NHL sets it apart. And then you throw in one game for the cup, and like, I mean, if you love the sport, you don't have to have a rooting interest in the teams to understand how like that's going to be a pretty tense, dramatic night, and it's all or nothing. I mean, it's literally, you know, going to be a pretty damn empty feeling for whichever team loses that game. Again, no matter how it plays out. And you know, if Edmonton can come back and win it, I mean, you're talking about ending a 31-year Canadian Cup drought. You're talking about the first team since 1942 to win a championship series down 0-3 in the NHL. You're talking Connor McDavid doing what, you know, everyone kind of thought he would do eventually, but weirdly, I picked Oilers at the start of this year, but
you did,
but I didn't see it, of course, playing out this way. I thought they were going to be a wagon that ran through the league, and instead they've been this team that certainly at their highest end, I think they have been the best team in the league when they've been at their peak, but they've obviously been through a lot of valleys as well to get to this moment. So, you know, it's pretty freaking exciting that we have that game.
What's awesome about this is, with regards to your pick, is that not only have you been consistent with saying the Oilers were going to be the team that gets there throughout the regular season, but even as they were down 3-0 in their series, you were still confident, at least with us, that they were going to come back and force a Game 7. You have been very confident in the fact that they were going to find a way to do it, and they did it. Like,
Well, some of that was just group chat confidence. So the stakes were pretty low.
But still.
Yeah, I did say in the group chat when it was 3-0 that the series would go 7. So, but it'd be one thing to say that publicly or to write a column saying that or something. I mean, partly I was just trying to wind producer Drew up, but I also thought it was a weird set of circumstances if you look back to put the Oilers down 3-0. Like, I didn't think they were by far the worst team in those games, and they just seem so calm. I will say this: this is not a prediction of a result because who knows? One game, anything can happen. But I have just never seen a team that's down. They still feel inevitable somehow. Like, it's weird. I don't know if it's George Mumford who behind the scenes, they've hired to help them with some of the, keeping their mindset right, or just maybe a product of the fact these guys have, they're ready to win, that they've been through all the experiences you need to accumulate to be ready to perform on the highest stage and understand what winning hockey looks like. But they just seem so unshakable. And, lots of players and teams, when they go down a series, say the things the Oilers were saying them, but it just felt different, at least from where I was standing. So, all that said, they could easily lose game 7. I mean, that's just the nature of the sport. I mean, that's why the winner take all scenarios are so compelling. I remember Switzerland beating Canada in the 2006 Olympics with like a 50 save performance. I think it was by Martin Gerber at the time. Things like that can happen. You can play well and lose, but Edmonton's given themselves a chance at doing something seriously that it's sort of a, like, tell your grandkids where you were kind of moment. And especially, we could probably talk a lot about you. I know you were in Edmonton there for game 4?
Game 4, yeah.
I'm not sure if I've ever seen a city quite like what I witnessed last weekend. Friday night specifically, just it was bonkers. It was total bedlam. And so I can only imagine if the Oilers find a way to win it, how it'll look, and if they, have a championship parade and all those things. It's been a long time coming for that city, and frankly for the country of Canada, which, I still believe loves hockey more than any other, means more to more people here than anywhere else in the world. I mean, I don't know. I feel like as much as we have the stupid debate, is this Canada's team? I think when it goes down to one game, I think a lot of people across the country are probably pulling for the Oilers. Just, I know it might be silly, and I realize, but I mean, it's not just Oilers. It's Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. I mean, these sort of generational players. I'm actually doing an exercise right now. I haven't completed it, but it's going to come out Monday at The Athletic, where I'm ranking the 18 Stanley Cup finals in the cap era.
Ooh, I like this.
Yeah, it is. And I've been lucky. I've been at actually 17 of them. In some, I haven't covered them all back to forward, but I was at a lot of the games essentially played during this era. And I was thinking of the ones, and like, maybe the Vegas Washington series wasn't like as epic of a series, but it was pretty special to see like Ovechkin finally get a cup, and that team Backstrom, those guys, after pushing so long. I mean, one of my favorite cups of that, like, it's probably going to be 1 or 2, is the 2009 final. And that was Crosby's first cup. But that was also just a tense, amazing series. The Red Wings were, they'd won the year before over Pittsburgh. Had a lot of, just a team full of Hall of Famers, but then Crosby and company came back in that series and winning game 7, 2-1. So that'll be up there. I think the 2011 Vancouver-Boston series it'll be in the top 3 to 5. Again, I haven't settled on the exact ranking yet, but it's been a fun exercise to think back over all the years. And quite honestly, I think I'm going to rank this one number 1. And there might be a little bit of recency bias in there. Like, I'll grant you, like, we'll see over time how it all shakes out. If game 7 is 5-1 one way or another, maybe we don't look back at, like, if it's a tense, close game 7 might tilt the scales a little bit. But that point being, for sure in the 18 cups that we've seen since the cap era came into effect, that this is 1 or 2. I think, like, pretty much, I don't even see much debate there. So that alone just, I don't know. I'm pretty fired up to see this game.
So what about this series in the context of sports period? Like, say the Oilers find a way to win game 7 and achieve essentially the impossible. Where are you ranking this among some of the other incredible sporting moments? Like, one popular comparison has been the LeBron James led comeback for the Cleveland Cavaliers down 3-1 in the NBA Finals in 2016 over the Golden State Warriors, the best team in regular season history. I think it beats that. I'm wondering how you feel about that.
Yeah, I probably don't have the proper enough perspective across all the sports, to be honest, to like give a really informed view. I remember didn't the Red Sox come back from 3-0 down against the Yankees on the way to their World Series? And that was the year that they ended their like 90-year jinx.
But that was also in a championship. That was also in a essentially the equivalent of a conference final series, but still an incredible achievement nonetheless.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be up there though among the craziest things we've seen. Especially like you look at their playoffs, like down 3-2 to Vancouver and win, down 2-1 and down 2-0 in Game 4 on home ice against Dallas in the conference final. They find a way out of that. I mean, they were in 30th or 31st or 32nd, depending on what point of the calendar you look in November. When you look at the whole season, like this is something, it's a pretty remarkable story. And, I think at the end of the day, like we love sports because we can celebrate the athletic achievements of others. We're awed by what other humans can do that we could only not even imagine. But part of it is a story, right? I mean, it's a story we tell ourselves. It's something we derive joy from and understanding of the world a little bit. And I just think this is a story anyone could resonate with, even if you don't understand the finer points of hockey. And especially when you come to understand that probably the best player in the game plays for the team, that the kind of series he's had, kind of playoffs he's had, the fact that there's even this looming idea of who knows what the future holds for the organization. I mean, it's just this really compelling thing. And so, yeah, I see people saying this will be like the biggest choke ever for Florida.
Yeah, biggest collapse.
I don't know. Yes, it would be, of course.
It would be.
The cup was in the building games 4, 5, and 6, and they could have claimed it. And then obviously the same will be true Monday for Game 7. But I almost look at it the other way. I think Edmonton's come and, they really flipped the series. I mean, the fact they won 8-1 in Game 4, like at the time, you don't know how much stock to put in that because you're like, they still got to win 3 straight games. But, very few teams lose 8-1 in a series they end up winning, like at any point when you think of it, the other side of that. And clearly, I think that they got to Sergei Bobrovsky in that game. He has not been a force of tilting things towards Florida's end enough since that point. I mean, the Panthers haven't led since the end of they won Game 3. They haven't even had a lead. The Oilers have scored first in the subsequent games and held on to a lead throughout those games. So, it's been a dramatic flip of the switch. And man, can you imagine what that moment's like if like they're handing Connor McDavid the Stanley Cup on Monday night?
We're talking about one of the most magical moments I'm telling you, in sports history, if it gets to that point.
Because of,
like,
here's the thing, because of your age, Julian, I'm going to say like you didn't see Wayne Gretzky play like in a point where you were conscious, but how many times have you seen the images of him with the cup and stuff? Because like,
yeah,
like it just gets replayed and played over time. That's potentially we're going to be treated to. I mean, look, even if Florida wins, I don't even know how to feel about that story because like it's hard to put your mind there. I mean, they would have rescued one from the fire.
Like the fact that they made it so difficult on them. You know what? The first person I'm going to think of, well, there's two people actually. Paul Maurice is going to be the first person I think of if the Florida Panthers win. Like for Edmonton, it's like Connor McDavid and all those guys, and everyone will get their turn. Paul Maurice and the emotional roller coaster it has been for him throughout his career, let alone this series, to get to this point. Getting there in 2002 as a much younger coach of the Carolina Hurricanes, who ended up getting walloped by Detroit. It takes him over 20 years to get back. He loses in 5 games to Vegas. And then this, oh man, if the Panthers find a way to win, he's the first person I'm thinking of. The second person I'm thinking of is Bill Zito, whose face and gaze has been all over the TV broadcast since Game 4 onward. Did you see that photo? There was like a fan who
was that photoshopped or was that a real photo? That's the only thing I couldn't tell. I saw the one you're mentioning.
I was up. So for those who didn't see it, it's a photo of an Edmonton Oilers fan taking a selfie of the box where Bill Zito and some of his other management staff are. And clearly Bill Zito is like pissed. He's, his team is not throwing away. Yeah, they had a 3-0 series lead. They don't have it anymore. And this fan is taking the selfie. I had heard another story where Bill Zito was at the rink. He was getting out of an elevator and then a swarm of Oilers fans like ran to him and started chanting to him. I don't know, man. It's like a hell for Bill Zito, a man who, I mean, was probably done more than chuck a water bottle onto a wall in an owner's box. Like, this dude is going through hell.
A couple things I'll say. So I was in the Panthers dressing room after they lost Game 6. I mean, understandably, it was an emotional dressing room. Like, it was definitely, you could feel the weight of what was going on in there. I could hear someone in the back room though saying, "Cats in 7, cats in 7." So they were trying to, as you should, they're trying to keep their spirits high. But man, like it felt heavy. And even it's hard to explain, but I can't see the players when they're walking off the ice towards the room, but you can hear them. And it was a bad night for someone's stick against the wall. I'll tell you that much. So that, some of the frustration you would expect in that moment. The other thing I think of though, if the Panthers win this, like they have a lot of players that have been sort of good troopers through the NHL to win their cup. Like I think of like Oliver and Ekman Larson, bought out a year ago by Vancouver, spent the first however many years of his career in Arizona, trying to carry that franchise's hopes. And he's been so good, frankly, in these playoffs. Like I actually think it's funny. He's headed to free agency. Like I think he's in a great spot to get a nice contract. It's funny when you remove someone from, we view it through like what they're making in Vancouver, and it's like this guy can't play, and then all of a sudden he's freed from that, and man, he's been good. Kyle Okposo, who actually came out of the lineup in Game 6, but he's been a first class citizen through 17, 18 NHL seasons, whatever it is, and I think of some of those guys, like the old guys to get a cup, older guys. They're I think Ekman Larson's 31, so he's not that old, but he's seen some things. He's had to battle through some things to get to this point. And there's similar stories, I guess, on both sides, but those are the guys that I would be happy to see really lift the trophy. Not to just say anything bad about the Panther star players too. I mean, it'll be pretty cool for them as well, but man, I'm full of like nervous energy kind of already. And it's still, let's do the math here. Still 33 hours to puck drop from the time of recording this, but I'm about to fly down to Florida this afternoon and pretty excited to get there and get this thing going.
Not just moments before we started recording, this tweet came through from Tom Galitti. Oddly, Sergei Bobrovsky is not one of two goalies warming up before Panthers practice scheduled to begin at 11 a.m. Anthony Stolarz and Spencer Knight are out there. Bobrovsky is usually the first one on the ice well before this on a practice day. What should we deduce from this?
Well, it's concerning. There's just no way around that. I don't know if Paul Maurice will end up giving a definitive update after practice that tries to calm the nerves, or if they'll just say, as a lot of teams say in these situations, come tomorrow and see what happens. But I mean, here's what we know about Sergei Bobrovsky: just a noted workaholic, essentially. I mean, he's so dialed into how he gets ready for games and situations. He spends a lot of time on the ice. Would normally be the first player out there for a practice like this one the day before Game 7. Obviously it's a sign to me he's either fatigued potentially or dealing with an injury situation or a bit of both. But I don't want to jump to any conclusions that he can't play, because let's face it, at this time of year, a lot of players aren't practicing like with any regularity. It's very rare for this particular player to miss a skate and then to miss it in this moment. I mean, there's no world where this is a coaching decision or an organizational decision. I mean, everyone being healthy in that scenario, there's not even a decision for it's Bobrovsky starting Game 7, but you wonder now, are they forced with a strange choice? I mean, I know Stolarz got in earlier this series when Bobrovsky was pulled in a game, but obviously doesn't really have much of a resume of playing anything close to a Game 7 of a cup final. Spencer Knight's career has been a little bit winding. Actually, a few years ago, he was playing playoff games for the Panthers. But I mean, the point is, with due respect to those gentlemen, the Panthers would much rather have Bobrovsky in there, but we'll have to see if this is a situation where he can't go, or I'll be fascinated to see how they treat this too, because if it is literally just a rest day, like I think it's best to come out and say, look, he's fine, he's starting. But if it's up in the air, I mean, that adds an extra layer of drama to what's already a pretty dramatic moment.
For sure. Also, one more thing before I ask you what you're hearing for our rumbling section. If Florida loses this series, I mean, even if they win, they still have to deal with some of these decisions. But You mentioned OEL going to free agency. Brandon Montour, what's next for him? Sam Reinhart. What do you think could be next for the Florida Panthers, I guess regardless of what happens to them in this series, when it comes to some of the pending free agents on their list?
Yeah, I think that the result probably doesn't change their approach with those players, but the fact of the matter has always been there's just not enough money to keep them all in the fold. And so, I've been of the mind that they would find a way to get a deal done with Sam Reinhart. I've got no information or reason to believe that's changed. And frankly, it's not like contract negotiations are going on behind the scenes. I mean, everyone is locked in on trying to win the cup, and there's not a lot. There's only going to be a handful of days once the season is over here before July 1st. But I would think that those calls start almost the next morning between the agents involved here. It seemed to me that Montour is likely to hit the market. Gustav Forsling, who's been the Panthers' top defenseman, signed a pretty sweetheart of a deal in March, an 8-year extension at $5.75 million. I think that kind of sets an internal cap on what they'd pay a defenseman. And the fact of the matter remains, I think Brandon Montour can command more money on the open market. And so, I've been under the impression he's likely to hit the market. I'm not sure about OEL, but, feels a little bit like he's probably going to have better opportunities in terms of just to make, money elsewhere. Yeah. I mean, this team's going to be different next year. I mean, they already are different from where they were last year. It's just, this is the nature of the cap era, right? And Edmonton will have similar kind of decisions, not as bigger than what happens with Leon Draisaitl, who's 1 year out from potential unrestricted free agency. It's my understanding there haven't been any contract talks there with him and his agent at this point. And that's something that the Oilers will 100% prioritize, trying to figure out if there's an extension to be reached. And then if not, if he wants to wait it out, if he's not sure what he wants to do, then they have a decision in terms of whether they want to trade him this summer. And so it's kind of crazy that we're talking about players that are going to play in the biggest game of the season in this manner, that within a week we could be talking about them moving on elsewhere. But that's kind of the nature of having a schedule that looks like this one.
It's one thing to talk about it for the teams in the Stanley Cup Finals. We are also talking about players on completely different teams with all the flurry of activity that we've already seen and that is projected to come. CJ, I need to know what you're hearing on a list of players and one particular news story that we can get to at the end. Let's start in Winnipeg with prospect Rutger McGroarty. What are you hearing about that situation, and how did the Jets and McGroarty get to where they're at now, where it looks as if the Jets are going to have to move on from their prospect?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it was mildly concerning when he didn't sign a contract after his NCAA season, just because he's a player that would have been in line for that contract. And the Jets, were open that they were, looking to sign him, were more than willing to allow him to start his professional career. But I think, maybe weren't willing to assure him of how that would go in terms of what sort of NHL minutes he'd get, how soon he'd get them, and all those types of things. And it seems now that they've got to a point where, there's a divide between what the player and, those that are close to him feel is right and what the team feels is right for his development. And certainly his name has now started to circulate as a potential trade target, with the draft coming. And so, I think it's pretty cut and dried that way. I mean, I don't know how this unfolds because this is a pretty prominent prospect, only a couple years since his draft. So he's still very young, and not someone that the Jets would otherwise be inclined to move on from. But, if that's the way they got to go, I mean, it could be a little bit like the Cutter Gauthier situation, I suppose, where Philly traded into Anaheim for Jamie Drysdale in season. I think it's a sort of similar kind of moment where, for the Jets to do something that makes sense, they're going to want to get something equivalent back. But, ultimately, if a player is willing to not sign with an NHL team and plays in the NCAA, he can become an unrestricted free agent in a couple of years' time if he's willing to play out the rest of his time at Michigan. So, the player does have a small bit of leverage in this, albeit, he'd have to wait another season beyond next year before, he could become a UFA. But, it seems as though the Jets are at least exploring the market to see something that makes sense. And naturally, there's a whole bunch of teams, I think, that would be interested in, adding Rutger McGroarty, just given what he's accomplished, the sort of leadership qualities that come with him. He's been a big part of a lot of Team USA's national teams at the age level, world championships rather. And, we'll just have to see where this goes next.
Is this a deal that happens sooner rather than later?
Most likely, because you're probably, I mean, look, the draft is kind of like its own trade deadline in a sense, not because you can't trade after the draft, but because a lot of times that the deals that get made involve draft picks that get made in that draft, right? So there's I guess I wouldn't call it urgency, but if it's a little more fun if you're trading for a draft pick, I think, to then be able to get a player right away. And so I would say that we've got a little less than a week until the first round of the draft. It's probably something that is going to pick up steam and see a conclusion by then. And then if not, maybe everyone's got to reevaluate where they're at. But I would expect there'll be a push to make a decision by Friday.
Okay. What about Martin Necas from Carolina?
The Hurricanes are still working through this one. It sounds as though they certainly have a handful of teams that are starting to make bona fide offers and so it's sort of gone beyond the tire kicking stage. And, I still fully expect the player to be traded. It seems like there's a mutual understanding that that's what he would prefer at this point in time. And so don't have anything much more concrete than that, but do think that it's sort of accelerated from when we first started talking about this, in terms of now you're down to a couple teams that are, trying to see if they can make something fit with Carolina, satisfy the conditions of sort of the hockey type of trade that we've been talking about over the last few weeks for Martin Necas. And remember, he's a restricted free agent, needs a new contract too. So, that's a name that pretty high up on the Athletics trade board for a good reason. And, another deal that I think could play out here in the next week or so.
Any teams for sure that are involved on Marty?
Not for sure. I know Winnipeg's been around it. Montreal's interested in all the scoring forwards. Be curious if Seattle was there. They're another team looking for some scoring, but I don't have a lot of concrete information in that way.
Okay. What about Tristan Jarry in Pittsburgh? This comes after, the big thing in Pittsburgh is that they just re-signed Alex Nedeljkovic to a new contract.
Right, and eyebrows are raised there, right? You feel like, Nedeljkovic, who was a potential UFA, could have hit the open market on July 1st for him to sign that 2-year extension that he did. You feel like you didn't bring back Nedeljkovic to keep Jarry. What I think remains to be seen, though, is can they move off of Jarry's contract? He's at nearly $5.5 million against the cap. Still has, I believe, 4 more years on that contract. Obviously played well enough at points in his career to earn that kind of deal, but we haven't seen it consistently enough. But we're in a strange marketplace, which we've talked about a little bit, but probably the top 2 or 3 goalies as free agents this year are Laurent Brossoit, who's been a career backup. He's played lots of big games and won big games, but he hasn't played sort of more than 30 in a season and showing you that at the NHL level. Anthony Stolarz, who all of a sudden, we'll see how this Game 7 situation plays out, but he's been a career-long backup. Big guy, 6'6" or so. Very well thought of, but not a sure thing. And then maybe Ilya Samsonov, is leaving Toronto and has played big games for the Leafs, helped them win a series against the Tampa Bay Lightning back in 2023, but has certainly had a lot of noted ups and downs in his career, cleared waivers this season. So those are among the top names in the free agent list. And so we go back to, if you're really looking for more of a sure thing, I'm not sure Tristan Jarry is a sure thing, but maybe in that environment, in that marketplace, Pittsburgh can move off him. I think they'll certainly try, but there's others out there, whether it's Linus Ullmark, who I do expect to be moved out of Boston. John Gibson's name is still kicking around. UC Saros, I think Nashville feels pretty confident they're going to be able to extend him on July 1st, but they've listened on him in the past, and so he's a name that I think is at least kind of, I wouldn't put him too high up the list, but as a possibility. So there's a lot of goalies out there, and I'll be curious to see if Pittsburgh can find a home for Jarry in that environment.
Linus Ullmark is a name I wanted to get to. Is there a team out there that seems to be a front runner for his services right now?
Well, it seems like there's some momentum with Ottawa, and he does have a limited no trade clause. I think he's willing to go play in Ottawa, and really he's entering what would be the final year of his contract next season. I would think a dynamic of, if this trade can come together, would be having it include some kind of extension to his contract. So the Senators aren't going to give up a ton of assets if there's a chance he can just walk away after a season. I think for him, if he's going to sort of waive his no trade or consent to this type of move, he's going to want a little security. And so, that deal obviously isn't done yet, but it does seem as though there's some momentum towards having that be, come to a conclusion. And, the Senators obviously are trying to sort themselves out defensively and on the back end. And, the signing of Joonas Korpisalo last year in free agency, just, I'm not going to put it all on Korpisalo. I think the players in front of him have some onus in it, but, didn't produce the results the organization is looking for. And, Allmark is only a year and a bit removed from his Vezina Trophy win. So, he's obviously done it at a high level. He was great. Actually, all 3 years he played in Boston. I know this year Jeremy Swayman took a little bit more of the starts and played more in the playoffs, but, he was consistently an above average goaltender for them and, would presumably be able to continue that if he gets a deal done and ends up in Ottawa or perhaps somewhere else.
Okay. Patrik Kane.
Well, I think the Detroit still has been talking with his agent. So, he's still Red Wings property till July 1st. Wouldn't surprise me though, if he ends up, heading to free agency. And, I think what's notable now is that, Patrik Kane went through a free agent process in October, November, before he returned after his hip resurfacing procedure. No one knew quite what to expect from him then. He ended up signing just the 1-year deal with the Red Wings. And, he put up basically a point a game and I think showed some glimpses of his old self. And I know in talking to Patrik right before the end of the regular season that he feels really confident that he'll be able to take it to another level next season, given that he'll have a full summer of training. That's something he wasn't able to have. He had the hip resurfacing last year on June 1st and spent most of the summer rehabbing that injury and obviously trying to just get back to, his normal movements, whereas now he can build some strength back and try to push himself a little more. So, Kane's going to be looking for, I would think, something like a 3-year contract. Maybe it ends up at 2 years. I mean, that's where the Devils are in the details of the negotiation. But, there's been lots of smoke about a return to the Rangers. I know that they felt good about his short time there after they acquired him at the trade deadline. It didn't work out with a long playoff run, but, really liked the person. I think he likes the big stage. By no means do I think that's a done deal, but I could see the fit there and I could understand that speculation. But, certainly feels as though he's going to test free agency. And if we had to pick a front runner, I'd say it would be New York.
Last one for you, the Arizona Coyotes and their land situation.
Yeah. I mean,
oh my God.
Does this surprise you though?
No, it didn't. It didn't surprise any of us.
This is a bit like if you ever had a friend who's always kind of like, he's always stepping in it. The Coyotes are our friend that is always stepping in it. I mean, look I don't think we need to we don't need to dig down too deep on this one. I felt like it was a long shot at best anyway, but Alex Morello did secure as part of the sale of the team's hockey assets to Ryan Smith in Utah, a 5-year window to bring the team back there. I can't remember the way it was worded at the time, but it basically meant they had to be ready to go in 5 years, and which means you got to be building a building pretty quickly because you don't put a building up in a year and a half, especially the kind of project they're looking at there where they're redeveloping a huge parcel of land. They've got to build parking lots and, do all sorts of work to have it ready to be built upon. And so I think all it essentially does is confirm what we know. It's going to be a 5-year wait. It's going to expire, and then we'll find out what really is to be with the future of the NHL in Arizona. But I don't want to waste much time getting into all the details because I just think this was always very unlikely to happen. I mean, the reason we're in this spot is because Alex Morello owned the team for multiple years, tried to get multiple projects done that couldn't get off the ground for all kinds of reasons, lost a referendum in Tempe. And, he was never able to get the building built, and that's why the team's gone. And so, shocker, he's run into another problem getting the building built. He's got no credit, he hasn't built up any cachet with politicians there. I mean, to get an arena built, you have to satisfy a lot of things. Obviously, you need to have a lot of money. You have to have your financing in line. You have to have political support in order to get the necessary zoning done. Maybe in this case, he's buying land, potentially looking at buying land from the state. He just has not ever done any of the things that would be needed to align all those interests. So, unfortunately, I think it'll go quiet here for a time because he's got this 5-year window. We'll focus on the Utah Hockey Club getting launched in the fall. That'll be pretty exciting and cool for the league. And then at some point down the road, I think we're talking about expansion and hopefully there's some way somehow that a new arena gets built in the Phoenix area and that it's great for a hockey team. And then I do think the NHL will be back there. I mean, it's just a matter of time. I just don't know how much time it's going to take. It's going to take at least 5 years because I don't think the NHL wants to get back into business with Alex Morello unless they absolutely had to.
All right. It's time for Ask CJ, where we take in your questions from Twitter and from Discord. Let's start with this one from Colin Bradbury. Pretty straightforward here. The trade is 1-for-1. Patrik Laine for Mitch Marner.
No.
Who says no? Toronto does or Columbus?
Well, Mitch Marner might say no to that.
Very fair.
Let's not look past the fact that Mitch Marner's got a full no movement clause. I don't see that as a fit though. I mean, look at the Blue Jackets are going to do what they can to move Laine. I hope I'm openly cheering for this guy, the person to get back to what he was. Cause for me, he was one of the more fun NHL players at his best to watch. And obviously he's been through a lot of personal struggles and didn't go well during his time in Columbus, but I don't see that being the kind of to me, if the Leafs are trading Marner for a player, it's probably a defenseman. I'm not saying it has to be 100%, but the point is this is about, I mean, it would be about a lot of things, but it's about reallocating how their cap dollars are spent too. So I got, if we're doing the fake trades, the hypothetical trades, I'd start with trying to pair Marner up with a defenseman and a team that might make a deal that makes sense for Toronto that way.
There are a few people trying to pitch either a trade or some kind of trade idea in the Ask CJ. A little bit, it's kind of reminiscent of like trade deadline whenever people do this. Like, for example, from Roderick here, has there been any talk of the Toronto Maple Leafs moving Morgan Rielly? Trey Living has said multiple times that he wants to rework the Leafs defense. And if Mitch decides that he isn't waiving his no move clause, could Morgan be an option to make substantial change to the roster and gain cap space?
Not that I've heard. I mean, I can understand where the question comes from, but I think the Leafs are more focused on finding 2 right shot defensemen this summer than subtracting their top left shot option. Morgan also has a no movement clause. His partner, Tessa Virtue, has been public that she's quite pregnant. And so they're starting a family. He's the longest serving Leaf. I'll never say that no player gets to stay for sure forever in one spot, but I just haven't heard anything that would make me think that's in the Leafs' minds. And, I think for whatever you might think of Morgan Rielly's play, he's not overpaid. Like he's performing to his contract. And so, and I know that he brings a lot of qualities that aren't measured by goals, assists, or expected goals or anything like that. He's a real valued member of the locker room. So I think Morgan Rielly's not part of what's being looked at, but certainly the Leafs are looking to add 2 right shot D, potentially in free agency, potentially in trades. They are going to revamp that blue line. I've heard Timothy Liljegren's name out there a little bit as a player the Leafs might even look at moving on from. He's a restricted free agent, so it's not they have his rights still, but I think it's possible you see him traded. So I do think that you're going to see a much different Leafs blue line, but I expect 44 to be among the players still there.
Okay. From Ryan Burke, do you think the Panthers need the cap space this offseason to sign some of their big players like Reinhart and Montour? Do they trade someone like Spencer Knight to free up cap space?
I think it's possible. I've heard some rumblings that they've at least looked around on Knight. I don't know that it's a priority or anything like that, but a team like the Panthers and the way they're run, you have to look at all options. So I think if there's something compelling enough for them, they would look at it. But let's see how everything looks when the dust settles. I know it sounds kind of crazy. But I do think that they've at least thought about the possibility, like, would this make sense? I just don't know if it's advanced beyond to the point where other teams are really trying hard on Knight. I haven't heard anything like that, but I do think that they would have to look at it because every dollar matters for a team like Florida. That's, they've now been to 2 straight cup finals. They're definitely going to lose some of players that have been a big part of at least one of those runs, if not both. And they're going to have to find a way to get better. And that might mean some subtraction and, to make room for the additions, or even just to keep the guys in the fold that are UFAs.
Next one from Zahid Daya, or Daya. Hopefully I'm getting it right. Name one major player you would not be shocked if they were traded this offseason.
I guess I would have to say Leon Draisaitl, and that's not a prediction. It's just I think
whoa. Leon Draisaitl. Whoa.
Well, but that's not. I'm just saying there's a decision there. So I don't know how it's going to play out. Like, that's why. But I'm just saying it's not impossible. Like, if you see the Athletic trade board I put out, like we have at the bottom, like players we're keeping an eye on, and he's one of the ones. Like, so he's not on the trade board, but until we find out what direction he and the team want to go down in terms of an extension, I guess the fact that it's even a 10% possibility is all I'm saying. Like, I don't know how much. It's hard to put a percentage on it, but it's not impossible that he's traded. So I'm naming him. I guess Marner or Draisaitl would be the two biggest names that could still be traded. That both would be obviously blockbuster type of deals. So I know I've just radioed myself inadvertently because I'm certainly not reporting that Leon Draisaitl is going to be traded. But there's, should I stop talking? Is that what you're telling me to do? But
no, not even that. I just want to give the visual sign to Edmonton fans watching this who are hyperventilated right now. He's not saying it's going to happen. It's just,
I just think the Oilers are wary potentially about going into a year if he doesn't want to sign this summer. But they don't know, and I don't know if he wants to sign this summer. So we'll have to see.
We'll have to wait and see. This news story is developing. I see Elliot Friedman on this. I believe Anthony DeMarco from the Fourth Period's on this too. There's a possibility that Matvei Michkov, the Philadelphia Flyers prospect, could be in fact leaving the KHL for Philadelphia.
Yeah,
that is developing on the timeline right now.
That's not a surprise, though. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of. There was a report maybe 3 weeks, a month ago, about him having his contract terminated by SKA. I think that there's been a lot of optimism that he wanted to be in Philadelphia and that they'd be able to get it done. And so, yeah, I mean, pretty exciting player that the Flyers drafted last year. Was obviously a bit of a, I don't know if he was controversial, but there's a lot of debate around him because there was some uncertainty about, his intentions and his ability to come over to North America to play, how soon that might be. Maybe some other teams, he was also a bit of a mystery. If you remember, like, teams didn't see him. He didn't come to the combine because of the state of the world with the Russia-Ukraine invasion. Teams don't have as many scouts on the ground in Russia anymore. So, like, he was a bit of a mystery, but it sounds as though he is going to formally come over, sign his entry-level contract, and be ready to start the year. And, the Flyers have had they've had some good luck with some Russian players. Brought the goaltender over just at the end of last season, and be very curious to see how Michkov looks, when we get him in North America and he joins the Flyers. But yeah, all indications are that's going to happen. And it's, again, to me, that's not a huge surprise. I just think the Flyers they've been very delicate with how they've described the situation publicly, because I think they understand there's a lot that goes on when a Russian player is leaving Russia. But I think we'll see him over here soon.
One more for you from Waffle. That's just the name they've chosen to identify themselves with. Why is playoff MVP voting done before the game ends? What if Game 7 is tied when votes are due?
So we're allowed to, when voting. So the reason for it is there's 17 voters this year. That's a lot of votes to tally. When you look at how quickly the buzzer sounds and how quickly the Conn Smythe trophy is given out, I don't know, is it 10 minutes? Might be 8 minutes. Like, there's not a huge amount of time between those two things. The Conn Smythe trophy gets, I think, it gets given out before the cup itself is presented to the winning captain. So it's just a timing issue. But we are able to say if it's tied on Monday, if it's Florida, then this is how my votes look, or if it's this, or even you can say, if so-and-so scores the winning goal, like you can sort of put a yeah, but on there. You can put circumstances. In this case, I actually don't think it's that stressful. I think it's pretty clear who I think is the MVP, no matter how Game 7 goes. But what would be different if it's tied in the third period is maybe how I vote for my second and third place votes, things like that. So you are able to put conditions on there. And I think the league just does it this way because of timing. I wonder if there's a future where it's done online, like in a secure site somehow. Like I actually voted on the awards at the World Hockey Championship, the men's worlds this year, which I covered, and it was all done online in real time. But literally I was voting during the gold medal game. And then after that game, they announced like the tournament all-star team and the things I was voting on and the tournament MVP. I would think the NHL could go to that. And then maybe there'd be a way to vote a little bit last minute, but I think they're also nervous because the people voting are writing on deadline and that someone might forget or, there's no perfect way to do it. But I do think we have a pretty good system. And the fact that you can put conditions on there allows for various scenarios when you get into a Game 7 situation, especially.
All right, that's going to do it for our early week edition of the CJ Show. And now all we're left to do.
Good to see you on a Sunday, buddy. We haven't done a lot of Sunday shows. Sunday.
Yeah, we don't get to do a lot of these. I usually like the energy. I feel I've been a little bit low because it's the morning for me and I'm a little tired. But right. We got through it. We found a way to. I'm nowhere near as tired as you are. Nowhere near as tired as you are.
Well, we're not in a competition for who's had it worse here or anything. I will say though, and this has been maybe, and I've had a lot of crazy travel at times. This might be the craziest travel month of my life.
Yeah, I can imagine.
This is because today I'm flying down to Florida. I spent a night in Toronto to do some laundry because I hadn't been home in 16 days. And so this will be my 9th flight of 3+ hours in 15 days today. And then I have 2 more of them on Tuesday to Vegas for the draft. And then obviously 1 more home from the draft. So that'll be what? Bad math. 12 flights in a month of 3+ hours. And Vegas flights 5.5. Anyway. It's been awesome though. This series, it's been so cool to be on the ground. I'll tell you, the older I get, the more grateful I am for the opportunities, probably because I realize it's not going to last forever and you never know. And I'm also more comfortable kind of doing my job now. Like I think when I was younger, I was always nervous. Am I doing things right? Or, it's been a truly fun experience. I've loved working with Daniel Nugent-Bowman, Mike Russo, Pierre LeBrun. We've had a great career on the ground for the Athletic. I think we've done some good work. And anyway, I'm just pumped. We're you just know it's the last game. Like when you go to Game 5 or 6, you're thinking, if this happens, I fly here. But it's like, no, everything's locked in now. Just enjoy that last game.
Man, I can't wait to watch that game, and I can't wait to see everything that you write for Game 7. I can't wait for it all. This is, without a doubt, the most anticipated game, maybe in NHL history, I think. It could be. We're in a different era now too, right? The hype is a little different. I can't wait, man. I can't wait. And I am positive that if you are watching this or listening to this, even if you might be like, nah, you know what, I don't care, there's a part of you that cares. I know there's a few people online who I tried to poll a couple people about this and say, hey, how do you feel about everything going on? There's some people who are like, you know what, I don't care. My team's not in it. Like, this is awful.
Haters gonna hate.
I get it, but we're on the verge of seeing something incredible, or a team, climb the mountain and still fall on its face. Like, this is fun. This is incredible. This is sports. Sports are supposed to be fun. And for all those people who say, you know what, I'm not going to watch, I don't care, there's way more people who are going to be tapping into this to see what happens, including us both.
Do you know what's wild? We got through this whole episode. I didn't even mention that I met Chad Kroeger from Nickelback the other night.
Well,
I'll tell that story in a summer episode. We're at the end here, but
you can't just bring that up at the end. What was that?
Yeah, you can. It was really interesting. He's a massive Oilers fan, and we were in the same place after the game socially, so had a little chance to meet him. It was cool.
Are you a Nickelback fan?
I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but I'm not a hater. I know that that's a band a lot of people love to hate. I'm definitely not a hater, but I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm agnostic, but it was still cool to meet the guy.
That is actually cool. Okay, so we'll for the summer episode, I would love to know more about your encounter with Chad Kroeger. That would be really fun to recount for those summer episodes.
Yes.
Can't wait for those summer episodes, but of course, can't wait for Game 7. We will be back on Thursday. We will both be in Vegas for the NHL draft. See you then.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter, @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie, @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.